Hello students, in my previous classes I talked about the turgor pressure, water potential, diffusion pressure deficient, and knowledge of all these terms is very useful to know the absorption of water in plants. You know very well water is absorbed by the root but utilized by the shoot. So it's important to know how this water absorbed by root get transported to the shoot, and various theories were given to explain this, and most accepted one is the transpiration pool theory given by Dixon and Joly. But before going into this theory, I will explain to you in this class about the root pressure that is also responsible for the uptake of water in the plants, but not in tall tree, only in the small or herbaceous plants. Before going into detail, can you tell me what will happen to a stem or a branch if we cut it from the upper side of its twig? Yes, plant water or sap will start oozing out from the cut end, and this is known as bleeding. Means whenever we cut a plant from its upper side, some water will come out due to root pressure, because in a normal plant water is transported through the tertiary elements, that is xylem, and there is a continuity in water supply from the root to the shoot, also maintained by the transpiration pull. And whenever we cut the twig, then this transpiration pull continuously uptake water from the root system, but this continuity is broken by the cut end, and as a result the water droplet will oozes out due to root pressure. The concept of root pressure was first given by Priestley in 1916. However, the term root pressure was first of all coined by Stephen Hale in 1727. It was the Stocking who properly defined the root pressure. It is the pressure developed in the tertiary elements of the xylem as a result of metabolic activity of the cell. You know very well metabolic activities means various catabolism and anabolism processes occurring inside the plant. The root pressure theory is an active process, and it explains how water and dissolved minerals are transported upward in the some plants. Not in all, mostly in tall tree or large tree, but in small or herbaceous tree. Particularly when transpiration is low, because when transpiration is low then it is difficult to avoid movement of the water with the help of transpiration pull. Then there is a positive pressure which is generated in the roots, and this positive pressure is known as root pressure, and this pressure primarily driven by the osmosis. And osmosis is the process which transport water from higher water potential to the lower water potential, but as I explained to you that it is an active process, and in active transport movement takes place from low concentration to higher concentration. So here low concentration represent the concentration of the ions, which is generally low as compared to the root cell in the soil, because in soil water potential is usually high and water move from higher concentration to lower concentration. But when water move with pressure from soil to the root, ions are also transported along with the water, and these ions get deposited in the surrounding cell, lowering their water potential. In this way, water will continuously moving from higher concentration to lower concentration, or lower solute concentration to higher solute concentration. That means low diffusion pressure deficiency to high diffusion pressure deficiency. As I explained to you earlier that root pressure is an active process, means it requires some energy for the transport of the ions from the lower concentration to higher concentration along with the water, and this energy is provided by the metabolic activities occurring inside the root. However, this pressure primarily driven by the osmosis, because when water move from higher concentration to lower concentration from a semi-permeable membrane, then we call it osmosis, and it moves water into the xylem vessels, creating a force that can move water up to the plant stem. While important in certain situation, it is generally considered a minor contributor to water transport in taller plants as compared to the cohesion tension theory explained by the Dixon and Joly. Now let's know what is the mechanism of root pressure. As it is clear to you that it is the hydrostatic pressure that develops in the xylem vessel due to active absorption of water and mineral from the soil. And how this pressure arises, now this is the question. So this pressure arises from the osmotic movement of water into the root cell, particularly the endodermis, where the Casparian strips act as a barrier. As I explained to you in my previous class that water move up to the endodermis by the apoplast pathway, that is the non-living pathway through the cortex. But at the endodermis there is thickening in the form of Casparian strips that act as a barrier. So just imagine when water is flowing continuously and at sudden when there will be a block, then there will be rise in the pressure, and this pressure leads to movement of water inside the xylem vessel from the endodermis through the plasmodesmata or through the transmembrane, and this will leads to development of root pressure inside the xylem vessels. The Casparian strips also prevent the backflow of water and mineral from the xylem into the surrounding cell or cortex, which further contribute to the root pressure. Let's now know why this root pressure is an active process. And student, this is very important question for competitive exam, that whether root pressure is an active or passive process. So it is an active process because living cells are essential in the roots for the root pressure to develop. Secondly, oxygen supply and some metabolic inhibitor can affect the root pressure without affecting the semi-permeable nature of the membrane. And third, for active process we need some energy to transport the things from against the concentration gradient, and here mineral ions are transported against the concentration gradient because they are less inside the soil and more inside the a plant cell. Thus they are transported from their lower concentration to higher concentration with the involvement of energy, and this energy is supplied by the metabolic activity of the cell. When they are transported along with the water, they get deposited on the surrounding cells. As a result, the water potential of the surrounding cell get lowered because a solute concentration will be higher in them. As a result, their diffusion pressure deficiency will increase, and water will move from less diffusion pressure deficiency to higher diffusion pressure deficiency, or we can say higher water potential to lower water potential. And there will be a continuous water column that is maintained due to hydrostatic pressure or the root pressure developed due to presence of the ions. However, the sole driving force for the development of hydrostatic pressure or the root pressure is the osmosis, that is the movement of water across a semi-permeable membrane from an area of higher water concentration to low, and it is the primary driving force behind root pressure. As water moves into the root cell due to the concentration gradient, it creates pressure that pushes the water column upward. But the maximum root pressure generated is often not sufficient to transport water to the tallest tree. So this is the disadvantages of this theory, that it can't transport water to the tall trees. The maximum root pressure that can be developed in a plant root is typically around 0.6 megapascal. However, some plant species may not generate any root pressure at all. So means plant cannot rely on the root pressure to absorb water and transfer water to the shoot system. Usually the maximum root pressure that develop in the plant is typically less than 0.2 megapascal. And this root pressure is not sufficient to transport water to the tallest tree like eucalyptus. Now let's know about some factors which affect the root pressure. Root pressure is influenced by various factors like moisture, temperature, and presence of minerals inside the soil. It is typically higher in the tropical region or in tropical region also during rainy season, and in the temperate region during the spring season, because in the tropical areas the temperature is high. As a result, the water moves freely inside the cell, and in rainy season the maximum water is available in the soil, and it can move from its higher concentration to lower concentration. Students, here you need to keep in mind that only moderate temperature leads to higher root pressure, because at extreme low temperature enzymatic activity will be low, so the root pressure or the water absorption will be low. And in extreme high temperature the transpiration rate will be higher, and the water is absorbed by the transpiration pull theory, not by the root pressure theory, so the root pressure will be low. In temperate areas too, at the spring season, the rate of transpiration is comparatively low, and the solute concentration in the xylem element is comparatively higher as compared to the soil in the spring season. Comparatively, factors like malnutrition, low temperature, drought, and poor oxygen supply can reduce or eliminate root pressure, because they affect the ATPase activity or permeability of the membrane. So, water is not properly transported across the membrane. So, friends, that's all about the root pressure. I hope this topic is clear to you. It is very simple. The hydrostatic pressure develops in the tertiary elements of the xylem due to metabolic activity of the root, which generate energy and transport water from higher concentration to lower concentration.